Amelia Clark had dreamed of staying at the Kingsley Grand Hotel for years. It wasn't just any hotel. It was a place rich in history, nestled in a quiet seaside town where the walls seemed to whisper stories of old money and prestige. As a young girl, she had passed by the grand building many times, her heart full of longing. It seemed like a world far away from her own. But now, after years of hard work, she was finally in a position to enjoy the luxuries she had once only imagined. Amelia was no stranger to struggle. She had grown up in a small apartment, raised by a single mother who worked long hours to make ends meet. There was no room for luxury in her childhood, but Amelia had always dreamed big. She worked through her college years, often juggling jobs just to pay tuition. After finishing school, she started a small tech company in her living room, hoping to make a difference with a simple idea. Through countless sleepless nights, setbacks, and moments of doubt, Amelia built her business into something successful. She became a self-made billionaire, her company helping millions of people worldwide. Yet despite all her success, there was a part of her that still held on to that childhood dream. The dream of walking through the doors of the Kingsley Grand Hotel, a place where she could finally feel like she belonged. The day Amelia arrived at the hotel, she felt a strange mix of excitement and nervousness. She had made a reservation weeks ago, and everything was set. She had envisioned this moment for so long. The grand entrance, the feeling of the soft velvet carpet under her feet, the elegant chandeliers above her head. She imagined the courteous staff greeting her with warm smiles. But when she arrived, things weren't as she had imagined. The receptionist barely looked up as she approached. There was no warmth, no welcoming smile. The clerk's eyes flickered. For a moment when he saw her, Amelia brushed it off, thinking it was just her nerves. "Good afternoon," she said with a smile. "I have a reservation under the name Clark." The clerk glanced at the computer screen, his face turning slightly pale. He hesitated for a second before turning to speak with his manager, who had just appeared from the back office. Amelia stood quietly, unsure of what was happening. The manager approached her with a forced smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Good afternoon, Miss Clark," he said, though his tone was distant. "I'm afraid there's been a mistake. Your reservation has been cancelled." Amelia blinked in confusion. "Cancelled?" she asked. "But I confirmed everything. I have the email right here." She pulled up the email on her phone and showed it to him. The confirmation was clear, the dates were correct, and the booking number matched. She couldn't understand why this was happening. The manager glanced at the email quickly before shaking his head. "I'm sorry, Miss Clark, but we're fully booked. There's nothing we can do." Amelia's heart sank. She stared at him, trying to make sense of it. Was this really happening? She had been looking forward to this day for so long. She had worked so hard to get to this point. And now, standing in front of the hotel, it felt like everything was slipping through her fingers. The manager's eyes seemed to dart around nervously, as if he was hoping she would just leave. But Amelia couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. She had heard stories of people being treated differently at places like this, but she had never imagined it would happen to her. "Are you sure there's nothing you can do?" she asked, trying to stay calm. Her voice was steady, but inside she felt the weight of the rejection pressing on her chest. The manager didn't look at her. "I'm sorry, Miss Clark. Perhaps you could try another hotel nearby." Amelia's throat tightened. She forced a smile, though it didn't feel real. "Thank you," she said quietly, turning to leave. She walked out of the hotel and into the cool evening air, her mind racing. Her heart hurt more than she expected. It wasn't just the rejection. It was the sting of knowing that, despite everything she had achieved, some people would always see her differently, just because of the color of her skin. She had built her empire from the ground up. She had made it to a place where most people only dreamed of going. Yet, in that moment, it felt like none of it mattered. As she walked down the cobbled street, her thoughts were heavy. She remembered the long nights she had spent working in her small apartment, the days she had fought for every opportunity. She remembered how, despite the odds, she had kept going. But in that moment, it felt like the world was reminding her of the barriers that still existed, the walls that were hard to tear down. Her mind wandered back to her childhood, to the days when she used to pass by the Kingsley Grand Hotel, dreaming of what it would be like to stay there. She had imagined it as a place of welcome, of warmth, of respect. But now she saw it for what it truly was, a place that hadn't changed much at all. Amelia paused for a moment and looked back at the hotel. The lights inside flickered, casting a golden glow on the stone steps. It was beautiful, but it felt cold. She felt as if a part of her had been left behind, left outside the doors that she could never quite open. With a sigh, Amelia straightened her shoulders. She had faced worse. She had been knocked down before, and she had always gotten back up. This moment, this feeling, would not define her. She would not let it. As she walked away, Amelia whispered to herself, "One day, I will return, and when I do, it will be different." The end Amelia Clark sat at her desk, surrounded by stacks of papers, blueprints, and the glow of her laptop. Her small office was a quiet space filled with reminders of how far she had come. Each paper on her desk told a story. The early days, when she had worked from her cramped apartment, the sleepless nights spent coding, and the triumphs that had followed. It wasn't always easy, but Amelia had learned to push through the hardest moments. Now her company was one of the most successful tech startups in the country, and she was a self-made billionaire. She often found herself reflecting on the past, remembering how different things had been growing up. Raised by a single mother who worked 2 jobs just to put food on the table, Amelia knew what it meant to struggle. There had been days when the bills didn't get paid, and nights when she went to bed hungry. But even in the darkest times, her mother always reminded her to dream big. "You can do anything you set your mind to," her mother had said, even when Amelia wasn't so sure. With that encouragement, Amelia had set her sights on something bigger. She'd gone to college on scholarships and worked multiple jobs to pay her way through. After finishing school, she came up with an idea for a tech company that would provide affordable healthcare solutions to underserved communities. She didn't have much at first, just an idea, a laptop, and a burning desire to make a difference. Building her company hadn't been easy. There were countless rejections, setbacks, and moments when she felt like giving up, but Amelia wasn't the type to back down. She kept pushing forward, working long hours and making sacrifices. Slowly but surely, her hard work began to pay off. The company started growing, reaching people in need and gaining recognition in the tech world. It wasn't just about money for her, it was about helping others, giving people access to the healthcare they deserved. Years of dedication had finally turned into something huge. Amelia had sold her company for millions, a sum that most people would have spent on luxury cars, mansions, and vacations. But not Amelia. She didn't want to live a life of excess. Instead, she reinvested her wealth into ventures that would help those who were still struggling, just like she had. She built homes for low-income families, provided grants to small businesses, and started scholarship programs for young women of color who dreamed of becoming entrepreneurs. Despite all her success, there was one thing that still nagged at her, the memory of being turned away from the Kingsley Grand Hotel. That day had stayed with her, like a thorn in her side. It wasn't just the rejection, it was the reminder that no matter how far she had come, there were still people who saw her differently because of the color of her skin. It wasn't something she could escape. It was a part of the world, a part of the reality that she had to face every day. One afternoon, while Amelia was going through the news, something caught her eye. There was an article about the Kingsley Grand Hotel. The hotel, once an icon of luxury, was now in financial trouble and was being sold. Amelia's heart skipped a beat as she read the headline. She had never expected to see that name again. The Kingsley Grand had always seemed so untouchable, so far beyond her reach. But now it was being sold. The idea hit her like a wave. What if she bought it? The thought was so sudden, so unexpected, but it felt right. She couldn't explain why, but it felt like a chance to do something bigger. Something that would change not only her life, but the lives of others. Buying the hotel wouldn't just be about owning a piece of history, it would be about making a statement, about showing the world that things could be different. It would be her way of rewriting the story. Amelia knew it wouldn't be easy. She had seen firsthand how the hotel had treated her, and she couldn't forget how coldly she had been turned away. But now she had the power to change things. She could use her success, her influence, to turn the Kingsley Grand into a place of inclusivity, where people of all backgrounds felt welcome. She could transform it into something that stood for equality and opportunity, a place where no one would ever be made to feel less than. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard as she thought about it. What would it take to buy it? She had the money, but there were always complications in business deals, negotiations, paperwork, and the fact that the hotel had been a staple of the town for so long. But Amelia wasn't afraid of a challenge. She had faced many challenges in her life, and each time she had come out stronger. This would be no different. She immediately reached out to her team, instructing them to gather all the information they could about the hotel's sale. Amelia knew it wasn't just about the money. It was about the vision. She wanted to reshape the hotel, turning it into something that reflected the values she believed in: respect, kindness, and opportunity for all. As she sat back in her chair, Amelia couldn't help but smile. This was her moment. The Kingsley Grand had once rejected her, but now it was her turn to decide its fate. It was more than just a business decision. It was personal. She was going to take something that had been a symbol of exclusion and turn it into a place of hope, a place where anyone could come and feel like they belonged. In that moment, Amelia knew that this was the start of something bigger than just a hotel. This was about proving that one person, even in the face of adversity, could make a difference. She wasn't just going to rise above the past. She was going to create a future where people could walk through the doors of the Kingsley Grand and feel welcomed, no matter who they were. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the decision settle in. This was only the beginning, but it felt like a new chapter was about to unfold. The end Amelia stood in the front lobby of the Kingsley Grand Hotel, now the Clark House, and watched the guests bustle around. The grand chandelier overhead still sparkled, and the soft hum of quiet conversations filled the air. It was almost surreal to think that this was the same place where she had been turned away years ago. The floors, once polished and cold, now had a warm glow to them. The walls, which had once seemed so distant and unwelcoming, now felt like they were inviting everyone in. When Amelia first heard that the Kingsley Grand Hotel was being sold, she had seen it as more than just an opportunity to make a business deal. It was a chance to change something that had always represented a world she didn't fit into, a world that had rejected her. The hotel had been a symbol of exclusivity and privilege, but now it would become a symbol of inclusion and equality. The first thing she did after buying the hotel was to rename it. The Kingsley Grand was gone, replaced with a new name: the Clark House. The name wasn't just about rebranding a business, it was a statement. Amelia's name on the hotel sign was a reminder that anyone, no matter where they came from, could have a place in the world. The Clark House was meant to be a space where people could walk in and feel like they belonged. It was no longer about status or wealth, it was about community and respect. Amelia's vision didn't stop with the name change. She knew that a true transformation had to happen on every level. The hotel staff was the first place she focused her attention. She had seen how the staff at the Kingsley Grand had treated her, how some people, simply because of their race or background, were overlooked or dismissed. She wasn't going to let that happen again. She started by restructuring the staff, making sure to hire people who had often been given little chance. She made sure that Black, Asian, and Latino workers had a place just as much as anyone else. But she didn't stop there. She made sure women were placed in leadership roles, giving them opportunities that were rarely offered before. Amelia wanted everyone at the Clark House to feel valued, whether they were in the kitchen, the lobby, or behind the scenes. In the months that followed, the hotel underwent a physical transformation as well. The walls were painted in warm, inviting colors, the furniture was replaced with comfortable pieces, and the guest rooms were designed to make people feel at home. The Clark House was not a place to show off wealth. It was a place where people could relax, enjoy themselves, and feel welcome, no matter who they were. As Amelia walked through the lobby one morning, she couldn't help but feel proud of how far the hotel had come. She stopped to speak with the staff, checking in on how they were doing, making sure they knew how much they were appreciated. As she walked past the front desk, she saw a familiar face, a face she hadn't seen in years. It was the same manager, who had once turned her away. He was standing behind the desk looking down at the computer screen, but when he saw Amelia walking toward him, he froze. His face went pale, and for a moment, he seemed unsure of what to do. He hadn't expected to see her again, not in this place, not as the owner. Amelia met his eyes, and for a moment, the two of them just stood there in silence. She saw the hesitation in his eyes, the awkwardness. She could tell he was nervous. "Didn't expect you to come back," he said, his voice quieter than it had been before. There was a hint of shame in his tone, but Amelia could also hear a kind of surprise. Amelia smiled, her expression calm but firm. She didn't feel anger or resentment, just a quiet confidence. She had risen above it all. "I didn't come back to take revenge," she said softly. "I came back to make sure no one else ever feels the way I did." Her words hung in the air between them. The manager opened his mouth to say something, but no words came out. He seemed to realize in that moment that things had changed. The hotel that had once stood for privilege and exclusion was now a place that stood for inclusion and fairness. It wasn't about who you were or where you came from. It was about how you treated others. It was about respect. Amelia could tell that the manager was still processing everything. She didn't expect him to suddenly understand or change. She wasn't looking for an apology. What mattered now was the bigger picture. The Clark House was a place where everyone had a chance, no matter their background, and that was the change she wanted to make. "I hope you understand," Amelia said, her voice gentle but clear. "This is a place for everyone. No one should ever feel less than because of who they are." The manager nodded slowly, his eyes meeting hers. It was clear that he didn't know what to say, but the message had been received. Amelia didn't need him to apologize. She didn't need him to make things right. She just needed him to understand that the world was changing, and she was part of that change. As Amelia walked away, she felt a sense of peace settle over her. The Clark House was more than just a hotel. It was a movement. It was a place where people were treated with dignity and respect, regardless of their race, gender, or background. The hotel wasn't just a place to stay. It was a place where people could feel like they mattered. Amelia smiled to herself as she moved through the hotel. She had created something bigger than herself. She had turned her pain into power, her rejection into strength. And the world, starting with the Clark House, was better for it. The day of the grand opening arrived, and the Clark House was buzzing with excitement. The front steps were lined with colorful flowers, and a bright ribbon stretched across the entrance waiting to be cut. People gathered in the lobby, chatting excitedly about the transformation they had seen over the past few months. There was an energy in the air, a sense that something big was happening, something that could change the community for the better. Amelia stood near the entrance, her heart racing with pride and anticipation. She had worked tirelessly to get to this point, and now the moment was finally here. She watched as community leaders, business owners, and families gathered to celebrate. There was a small stage set up where several people would speak, each one sharing their thoughts on what the opening of the Clark House meant. For some, it was just the reopening of a hotel, but for Amelia, it was so much more. It was the beginning of something that would touch lives in ways she had always dreamed of. As the ribbon was cut, applause filled the room. The hotel was officially open, but Amelia knew that the real work had just begun. This wasn't just a business venture, it was a platform for change. She had worked hard to create a space where people from all walks of life could come together, where everyone, no matter their background, could feel valued. Now she was ready to take the next step. Amelia had always believed in the power of education and opportunity. Growing up, she had seen how hard her mother worked to provide for her, and how, despite all their struggles, Amelia had been determined to achieve more. That drive had led her to build a successful business, and now she wanted to pass that opportunity on to others. She announced the launch of a new scholarship fund for young people of color who dreamed of owning their own businesses. She wanted to give them the chance to succeed, just like she had. The scholarship was just the beginning. Amelia also partnered with local schools to provide job training programs for high school students. She knew that many young people faced challenges similar to the ones she had faced growing up. By offering training and mentorship, she hoped to open doors that might have seemed closed to them before. It wasn't just about giving them a job. It was about teaching them the skills they needed to thrive in a world that wasn't always kind to people like them. For the staff at the Clark House, the changes had been life-changing. Many of them had come from difficult backgrounds, and for the first time in their lives, they felt like they were part of something important. No longer did they feel overlooked or undervalued. Amelia had given them a place where their hard work was appreciated, where they could grow and develop in their careers. The hotel wasn't just a workplace. It was a family, a community where everyone's success was celebrated. Amelia sat in her office that afternoon, reflecting on how far she had come. She gazed out the window, watching the guests stroll through the lobby, laughing and chatting with one another. The sound of their voices filled her with a quiet sense of accomplishment. She had turned the dream of a little girl into a reality. As a child, she had walked past the hotel, imagining what it would be like to step inside, to be treated like she mattered. Now, here she was, not as an outsider, but as the owner, the one who had made it all possible. Her thoughts wandered back to those early days when everything had seemed impossible, when she had faced rejection, when she had been told she wasn't good enough, when she had been turned away simply because of the color of her skin. But she had kept pushing forward. She had refused to let those obstacles define her, and now she was standing in the very place that had once rejected her, a place that she had turned into something new, something better. Amelia's phone buzzed, interrupting her thoughts. She picked it up and saw a message from one of the staff, members thanking her for the opportunities she had given them. She smiled to herself. This was the reason she had worked so hard. Not for the money or the recognition, but to make a difference, to create a place where people could feel like they belonged, no matter their background. She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the hotel once more. The Clark House had become more than just a hotel. It had become a symbol of healing and growth. It was a place where people could come together, where they could leave behind the struggles of the outside world and just be themselves. It was a place where dreams were made and opportunities were created. Amelia had healed from the wounds of her past, but she knew the work wasn't finished. There was still so much to be done. There were still so many people who needed help, so many young people who needed guidance and support. The Clark House was just the beginning. She had started something that would continue to grow, to spread, to inspire others to take action and make a difference. As the day came to a close and the hotel buzzed with activity, Amelia took a deep breath and smiled. She had achieved so much, but she knew there was still more ahead. She was ready for it. She was ready for whatever came next. The end.